Hello, Internet. So lately, I've been doing a lot of exercise, or at least trying, primarily because I was tired of looking like a human spaghetti. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to the gym, I'm not going outside, that's ridiculous, I haven't unlocked that part of the map yet. Instead, I downloaded a bunch of workout apps and started following their free exercise routines. I'm not paying for premium, like a real athlete would do. Now, the only problem is that, well, I'm not a real athlete. And I hate doing exercise because it hurts and I'm a weak piece of shit. But that got me wondering, you see, because why does exercise hurt? And how do muscles grow in the first place? Alright, so I figured that the first thing I should do in order to understand how muscles work is, well, to understand what muscles are. Because it's been ages since your boy took a biology class and, well, I forgot everything. So I did some exhaustive research, and this is what I found out. This is a muscle. Essentially, it's a type of tissue stuck to your bones by what are called tendons. Except I'm lying to you. Not all muscles are the same. There's actually 3 types. There's skeletal muscles, which we've just described. Then there's smooth muscle, which you have in your stomach and the walls of your arteries and stuff. And then there's cardiac muscle, which is responsible for keeping you alive. Now, as with everything else in your bodies, muscles are made up of muscle cells, except these muscle cells are cooler than regular cells, and so they get a cooler name, muscle fibers. Muscle fibers are very long, usually as long as the muscle itself, and they have multiple nuclei and a bunch of mitochondria, which we will get back to in a second. If we go even closer, the muscle cell itself is made up of these small parts that actually contract, which are known as myofibrils. But how do these myofibrils contract? So basically, all of these skeletal muscles are hooked up to the peripheral nervous system, which is sort of like the power grid of our bodies, by what are known as neurons, or motor neurons more specifically, which you can think of as the wires. And the electrical impulses which travel through these neurons is what actually makes the muscles themselves contract. Now, the actual way in which they contract is very complicated, but I'll try my best to explain. The idea is that within the myofibril, there's this alternating series of actin and myosin proteins. Essentially, you can think of actin as a thin wire with a flexible protective coat around it, and myosin as a thick wire which has a bunch of little arms or little bumps along it. Essentially then, in the myofibril, what we have is a thin wire of actin followed by a thick wire of myosin, followed by a thin, then by a thick, then by a thin, then by a you get the point. Interestingly enough, it is actually this arrangement of proteins what gives these muscle cells their striped appearance under a microscope. But I digress. Now, this complex grid of proteins is further divided into repeating units known as sarcomeres. Now, a sarcomere is just 6 thin and thick proteins arranged in a hexagonal pattern and capped off at the end by what are known as set lines. In a relaxed position, the myosin heads, or the myosin bumps, cannot attach or cannot touch the actin protein because of protective coat, which we mentioned earlier. When you contract your muscle, however, the electrical impulse causes the protective coating around the actin to move slightly up, therefore leaving a free space for the myosin heads to bind to the actin protein. Essentially, the mechanism works like a sort of weird caterpillar, with the myosin heads using the energy released from respiration in the mitochondria to push and slide along the actin layer towards the center of the sarcomere, essentially making these 2 set lines closer together. And that is a contraction. Now, I hope that wasn't too boring, but back to the question that brought you here in the first place. How do muscles grow? Like, what changes within the muscles causing them to become bigger? Well, before researching this up, I thought that, well, if the muscle grows, there must be an increase in the number of muscle cells, which is logical, but so wrong it's not even funny. You see, there's two ways in which a muscle can grow. One is myofibrillar growth, and the other is sarcoplasmic growth. So let's look at both in turn. Myofibrillar growth refers to the growth of the myofibrils themselves, more specifically to the actin and myosin proteins within them, both in size and in number. What happens is that when you're doing exercise, you literally break these protein chains apart at certain regions. And so then your body comes along with a bunch of amino acids, which are like the Lego bricks of proteins, and patches these up, making them a longer protein chain. Now at a certain point, these protein chains cannot grow any longer, and so they split up into two protein chains. This is also why you see these big guys take their protein powders with them to the gym. It's not all for show, it actually has a purpose. What's important to note here is that this process occurs when you are sleeping, which therefore tells us that the quantity and the quality of your sleep is actually a much more important factor in becoming strong than you might have thought. Then, on the other hand, sarcoplasmic growth refers to an increase in the volume of sarcoplasmic fluid in the muscle cell, which is basically just the cytoplasm of the muscle cell. Again, it has a cool name because muscle cells are cool. Particularly, it refers to an increase in the volume of glycogen, a type of carbohydrate, in the sarcoplasmic fluid, which causes the cell to become larger, basically swelling up. This type of growth is very common in bodybuilders. However, this increase in the size of the cell is not accompanied, like in myofibrillar growth, by an increase in strength. This is basically the real-life equivalent of pumping air into your biceps. It doesn't make you stronger, but it sure does make you look stronger, so why would you want to be stronger anyway, right? In either case, notice that it's actually the muscle cell that grows and not the number of cells. So there you have it. But now that we have our answer, it should be mentioned that these are actually just theories. No one really knows the actual specific mechanism by which muscles grow. However, this theory is really cool, at least in my idea. There's something inherently funny about us willingly breaking our muscle cells to, well, become sexier. So next time you're working out, doing those reps, and your arm hurts so much that you can't even bend it, you'll probably remember that you've broken a bunch of proteins and it'll hurt more. So, you're welcome. If you did make it this far into the video, mad respect to you. Thanks for watching another episode of Shower Thoughts. Please consider dropping a like and commenting anything you want down below if you did enjoy. And also, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss out on any of my other random content. And yeah, I'll see you soon. Peace.